My thoughts are interrupted when I turn the corner to find someone leaning against the opposite wall. Someone I'm not sure I particularly want to see right now.
Now look what the cat dragged out of the bag.
Of course I'd run into him of all people. Heaving a sigh, I brace myself for what's about to come. Are you here to kidnap me and turn me in all on your own?
Sadly, no. Maybe some other time if we get the chance.
Then why were you waiting to ambush me right around the corner? He doesn't even bother trying to hide the growing smirk on his face. Damon doesn't just casually hang around the corridors. He was waiting for me. But what for, I wonder?
I was bored.
Damon looks anything but bored, if I'm being honest. Sapphire eyes glint sharply as he stares at me, curiosity and intrigue shining plain as day. It hurts knowing that as far as he's concerned, I'm as disposable as candy, especially with everything already going on in my mind. Damon was never friendly per se, but sometimes it felt like he cared. Perhaps he resents me because of my family? Just like most people in Celiota.
Getting blood out of fabric is ridiculously tiring. So I was burning them outside. Less work this way, you know?
I had almost forgotten how he'd claimed he took care of things last night, the blood staining his hands and cheek. Yet his hands are now pristine, skin unblemished, enough to make anyone in my position question if there really was any blood at all just a few hours ago. A shiver makes its way down my spine, and words are leaving my mouth before I can even think them over. Doesn't it bother you? Death?
Why would it?
Because it's terrible? The corners of his lips pull up, making it as clear as the bright sun outside just how much he's enjoying this conversation.
Wouldn't know. Never tried it.
I'm serious.
So am I. It makes no sense to worry about that. Death is a natural part of life.
He says it so casually, my focus shifts entirely to him. How are you so used to it? He doesn't answer me right away, instead choosing to narrow his gaze at me. It's almost if he's considering how serious I am with my question before giving me a response. It must sound silly, naive even, given I already know how he was born and raised in Cursa, and have a rough idea of how things work there. The question had still been honest. It might be because of how sheltered I'd led my life until now, but the idea of death being normal, being something that doesn't bother him, disturbs me.
Huh. Guess you are serious about it.
Relaxing his stance, Damon bites his lower lip before letting out a sigh.
My parents were killed when I was 10 years old or something. They owed a lot of money to this gang and, well, obviously they collected. Don't. I don't care. I was better off without them anyway. Not like they were caring and nurturing people. I pretty much raised myself on the streets way before that. They didn't bother me. I didn't bother them. It was a fair exchange. Besides, I turned out pretty damn fine if you ask me.
But Damon, you were 10. That's not... He rolls his eyes at me, ignoring my interjection and carrying on with his story as if he had no interest in what I had to say.
I had this friend, a year older than me. She taught me how to pick pockets, how to hold a knife the right way, reading people. All about how to survive in Cursa, basically. We were just another couple of poor, skinny kids on those streets. My parents being killed was nothing different than what had happened to her. Or to any other kid out there. Death didn't make you special. It was a part of our lives from the beginning. It was how you handled it that mattered. Nothing changed after that. If anything, it got easier for me. I didn't have to worry about their debts, as that had been handled. I started doing some jobs, making a name for myself on the streets, until I finally joined one of the main gangs in Cursa and ditched that hellhole, earning myself this pretty little scar.
Damon taps the scar on his eyebrow twice and stops after that, raising an eyebrow at me inquisitively, almost as if he already knows all the questions I want to ask. Growing up as an orphan was not something very common in the Gold District. Even when I sneaked out of the palace with Vex, I didn't see that side of Celiota. I can't even begin to imagine what it must have been like to grow up in such a reality. No family, no safety, no schools. Do the kids in Cursa even have enough to eat? Isn't there anyone to help them? Aren't there guards responsible for handling security? There are so many things I want to ask him. So much I want to know. Taking the leap from having a family member die and resorting to thievery to taking lives for a living is still too much. Why? My voice drifts off. It's not something easily discussed, how one resorts to being an assassin. I want to know, to maybe understand better what made Damon who he is, but still. A low chuckle pulls me out of my reverie, and I find Damon's sharp smile taking its familiar place on his face again, only this time with a cold, sadistic edge to it I don't think I've seen on him before.
Oh, you didn't quite get it. I learned how to steal and wield a knife way before they died. And when I say my parents were killed, I don't mean I came home and found their bodies resting peacefully in our living room.
A shiver runs down my arms, dread flooding me in anticipation of his next words.
I mean, I was there, and I was meant to have died as well. Collateral damage.
Then how? The question dies on my lips at the sight of the smile on his face, the dark laugh that escapes him.
What do you think?
I don't want to think about it. I don't want to make it real by saying the words. But I do it anyway. You killed him.
Naturally.
You were a child.
And what did you expect me to do? Lie down and die?
There's nothing one can even respond to that. A child should never have to be faced with that choice, or lack of choice in that situation. It doesn't justify Damon being a jerk most of the time, but at least it starts to explain why he takes death so lightly.
You gotta do what you gotta do. And sometimes that means killing a guy. Or two.
What else do I expect the kids in that situation to do? How else should I expect Damon to react when faced with death after growing up like that? I guess that makes sense, in a way.
Gotta say, I'm surprised you get it.
It's not something that should be normal. I don't agree with that. But I guess...
Look, nobody does. But the world ain't a fancy ride for most of us. And when you aren't lucky enough, you gotta do what it takes to survive.
The whirring sound of the ship's engine is the only thing that cuts through the silence surrounding us after that exchange. It's a lot to process. And despite my response, I'm still conflicted about it. It's hard to believe nobody cares about the reality of the people in Cursa. In Terranium, had it truly been my family who made it acceptable to ignore this kind of suffering? Had it been my father? It hadn't escaped my attention how Damon doesn't seem to be treating me any different now that my past has come up. Everyone so far had changed, even if only slightly, but he is still the same. Can I ask you something?
What?
Do you hate the Pegassi for what my father did?
You want to know what I think about Zovak offing him?
Yes. I wouldn't have phrased it that way, obviously, but I can't really fool myself into being surprised by Damon's tact anymore. I mostly want to know what reason he could have had for wanting to turn me in so soon.
I couldn't care less about that if I tried. Dear old daddy yours was a slime ball. Everyone knows that. I'm pretty sure even you know that. He never struck me as a good father figure.
I know he was a bad king. And you're right. We were never really close. But did he truly deserve to die? Did my whole family deserve it?
Don't we all, I wonder? Don't get me wrong. Zovak's a slimeball in his own right, too. And I'd know. I worked for the man. I just don't have anything personal against him like the others.
My eyes widen at that, though it's more about how casual he makes it sound, than by the fact he did that at all.
But isn't he a dictator? He killed my whole family.
You don't really think the leader of the coup did grunt work, do you? At best, he killed the king. Maybe a queen if they were around. Zovek is a damn genius. Being evil or good is debatable. Never saw him hurt a pet, so I don't really hate him or anything.
That's where you draw the line?
You're damn right it is. He wouldn't be alive if he had.
There isn't a hint of humor in him as he states that. It both terrifies and astonishes me how little Damon seems to care about human life. But you put a pet in the mix and he goes feral. That is absolutely not a wound I'd willingly poke.
We actually bonded over some stray cats in between jobs. Fun, easier times to live, I tell you.
What did you do for him anyway?
Oh, you know, this and that.
Which clearly means murder and any other sort of criminal activity I could come up with, I'm assuming.
I first ran into the guy after I left Cursa and I was looking for a job. It's not like I cared who I worked for as long as they paid me.
But then you left his gang?
Nah, I never really joined it. I was more of a freelancer, if that makes it easier to understand. Sure, he tried to sign me up, but I don't really appreciate being tied down. He ended up roping in some other guy, this kinda weird redhead. But he was alright. I used to call him Carrot Head even, but we lost contact after that. Anyway, it was a boring, lengthy assignment, so I passed it and left on good terms.
A redhead who worked for Zovek? Damon couldn't possibly have known Vex before, right? Right. Pushing the thought from my mind, I try to stay focused on my questions. There's still a lot I want to know, several questions unanswered, and I'm not sure how much more he'd be willing to let me ask.
If you don't like being tied down, how come you're now part of the A6?
Because I want to be. You know, you've passed the one question request a long time ago. You get one more. I've got stuff to do.
Pursing my lips, I try to think of one final question, despite not being any need for that. There's only one more thing I need to know, one thing that's been bothering me since last night, and another chance to ask will hardly come by.
Why did you want to sell me out?
Because it's the obvious choice to make.
With a sigh, he runs a hand through his hair before looking at me through narrowed eyes.
If you're hoping for an apology, stop. Having you around's been fun and all. But at the end of the day, we are the ones with the big-ass bounty on our heads. And I don't like having to work even harder to make sure these idiots stay alive. Or you, for that matter. Shipping your ass off to Zovak would for sure be the easiest way out of this mess. But somehow Cal's grudge against the guy is still bigger than logic, so... And don't even think about asking me about it. It ain't my story to tell. Cal may be an idiot sometimes, but I like the guy. Not to mention, I owe him.
I can appreciate the respect he seems to have for Cauldron, and for keeping the captain's business his own, but I am also quite curious by what he had meant by saying he owes him. I'm well aware Damon hadn't given up on turning me in out of the kindness of his heart, but why not push my luck?
Well, you should be glad they didn't let you sell me out.
Damon quirks an eyebrow at me, watching me like a hawk as I take a step closer to him, all but closing the distance between us.
You'd miss me terribly if I wasn't around anymore.
Faster than I could expect, his face had shifted into that crooked grin that has me questioning everything, and he spins us around, forcing me to lean against the wall as he stands in front of me. His scent floods my nostrils, clean cotton with a hint of mint, making my mind spin in circles as I once again find myself getting lost in the deep, sapphire ocean in his eyes.
There hasn't been a lot to miss though, has it? Other than this game of cat and mouse you seem to enjoy playing, Nico. All you have so far are words. And you already know I don't appreciate being tied down.
Slender, cold fingers run softly over my neck, stopping under my chin and tilting my head up as Damon leans in.
I'm much more on the side that enjoys doing tying. You see.
His eyes never leave mine, utterly serious in spite of his grin, almost as if he wants to see how far I'm willing to go with this. My heartbeat thrumming in my ears is the only thing keeping me grounded. Damon is right. I like this game we play. I start it most of the time. But by the gods, he doesn't know how to play fair. Will I ever win this thing? Unlikely. Before I can muster up a response, Damon throws me a wink and steps back, thoroughly enjoying the frazzled state I'm in. Jerk. Damon might not be the kindest of the crew, quite the opposite in fact, but in some strange way, talking to him made me feel a little better. If that was his intention, or if he'd only been curious, I don't think I'll ever find out, but I'm glad for it at least.
Someday your brain will burn out if you keep overthinking everything like that. Try not to destroy anything while I'm gone, Your Highness.
He shoots me a final smirk and turns to leave, but something sparks in me and I have to stop him.
Hey, Damon, just one more thing.
What now?
Did you know who I was?
Nah, but it makes sense a shattered little thing like you would turn out to be a Pegassi. Funny how even when I'm joking I turn out to be right.
It's a struggle to keep from rolling my eyes again, but I try to hold the most regal expression I can muster. However well that turns out.
I could have your head for mocking me.
You'd have to catch me first.
Jerk.
He doesn't reply, choosing instead to click his tongue at me as he starts walking away, in typical Damon fashion. Out of spite, I head in the opposite direction, trying to find something to do to keep my mind from being engulfed by unwanted thoughts.